Hey everybody, What's It Fox Gaming here. So I've got a two-part video for you today. The first part is me basically explaining why I think Pestilence pretty much overnight became the single best weapon in the game for soloing heroic content, or really any content, even after its nerf. So I'm going to go into detail as to why that is, and then the second part of the video will be just my build and why I recommend that you play the build the way that I do. Because Pestilence can be a bit of an unwieldy beast, but when played right, it is phenomenal when combined with these new little sleeper buffs that a lot of people don't realise even happened. The video length should be quite short though, so don't worry, it's not going to take too long to demonstrate all of this. I won't go through an entire mission or anything. So first of all, if you don't know, Pestilence received a 10% nerf, just an overall damage nerf to all damage that it outputs in TU10. Just to stop its dominance in the PvP arena, and that's fair enough, you know, it was a bit too good. They also stopped it stacking with the True Patriot white flag buff, in which both the Pestilence, Plague of the Outcast tick, and just your bullets in general, your weapon damage, were both proccing the heal, you know, upping it to from 7 to 14% or 3 to 6% after the nerf. So none of that happens anymore, it's just if you shoot them, you get the heals, if you don't, you don't. So that's kind of the known stuff, you know, everybody knows about that, and that's why you don't see Pestilence that often anymore, or, you know, it's certainly a lot more rare. What they also did was improved how it works in PvE. Now, yes, it still received that damage nerf, but they improved Plague of the Outcasts. So as we all know, hits apply a debuff dealing 100% weapon damage over 10 seconds, and this stacks up over 50 times. Whenever an enemy dies with this debuff, all stacks are transferred to nearby enemies within 25 meters. And that's always worked pretty well in PvE. I've always been an advocate of Pestilence being one of the stronger weapons for soloing PvE content anyway. The reason that I now think it is literally the best weapon to use is that two things that were buffed under the radar. One, Plague of the Outcasts now correctly affects all mechanical targets. So not only does it spread to them, but you can top up the buff on those mechanical targets. So we're talking drones, we're talking warhounds, we're talking the healer stations. They all receive the Plague of the Outcast debuff, and you can top that up by shooting into them, which is fantastic. It means you just melt warhounds quicker than you've ever been able to. Secondly, they improved how Plague of the Outcast stacks with itself when applied to multiple enemies at the same time. So for example, let's say you've got 3 enemies in front of you, you shoot the one to the left, you get 10 stacks on him, you shoot the one to the right, and you get 15 stacks on him. But because you applied the stacks to the guy on the left first, he dies. Because he has less stacks than the guy with 15, it wouldn't add on to that, and what it would do is just send those 10 stacks to the third enemy in the room, and then if the 15 guy died, it would just make it 15. So it didn't used to calculate the total amount of stacks in the room, it just used to do it on the last thing to die. It would send that, and it would actually in some cases even override a higher stack count on an enemy. It was all over the place. Now what it does is simply add everything together. So if you're shooting enemies all around the room and they're all dying here and there, what they're doing is just adding them on top of the closest person. So 10 adds on to 10, that guy's now got 20. If he dies, he adds that onto the guy with 15, so it's now up to 35. And before you know it, you're already sat at the maximum stacks just by shooting 3 or 4 enemies in the room, and that's still spreading around. So the damage potential of this weapon is now huge, because it not only correctly applies those stacks to mechanical targets, but it correctly calculates the total stacks in the room. And it's fantastic, it's an absolute joy to use. So that's the first part of the video. That's why I recommend you should really use Pestilence in PvE for solo play in particular, but you know, try it out in all missions. So my build, now this is going to probably get scoffed at a little bit. I know everyone loves their DPS talents like Headhunter, Glass Cannon, Obliterate, Vigilance. Mine are completely separate to that, and in particular I've noticed on the Facebook channels and Reddit that Sawyers gets a lot of hate, but I'm going to explain why it is best in slot for this particular build and why you should absolutely try my version of this build. I haven't seen this anywhere else, and I think that I've come up with a little bit of a hidden gem here. So Braced gives you weapon handling up to 45% total when you're sat in cover. So this build is entirely based around being in cover, and the reason for that is that Pestilence applies all of its damage in the background, you know, whilst you're sat in cover healing and reloading, which, you know, it's an LMG at the end of the day. It can be quite unwieldy, and in solo play the last thing you want to do is have all that downtime reloading. So Braced gives you 45% increased handling, which means that Pestilence now shoots like an absolute laser. It's stable, it lands consistent headshots, it reloads in a heartbeat. Honestly, it's an absolute dream to use. I combine this with Composure on the backpack because that gives me 15% weapon damage just for being in cover. And then I use Sawyers because these give you up to 30% total weapon damage just for being in cover and not moving. So that's obviously higher than the 15% max that you can get on a red item. Now these get a lot of hate because if you move you lose the debuff, and yes, I did get a nice little buff in TU10 where you retain it for 10 seconds, but I still think they're best in slot. It's 30% raw damage, and another little trick for you, another little secret, this does buff the damage of Plague of the Outcasts, because that's impacted by, if you see there in the orange text, 100% weapon damage. If you sit in cover and this is slowly going up, but you're not shooting into the enemy, you'll notice the tick damage slowly increase because this is buffing your weapon damage in the background. So this works beautifully with Plague of the Outcasts. Composure, I've chosen this over Vigilance because you solo play with this build, or you're probably going to be, that's how I play it anyway. And of course Vigilance, the moment you take damage, you've lost your buff. So 25% having that up 10 or 20% of the time is way worse than just having a constant, reliable 15% weapon damage just by being in cover. I run this with the decoy and either the fixer drone or possibly the res hive. It's because we run this with gunner, you do get 10% armor back on kill, and because it's solo play you're the only person getting the kill, so that's really easy to maintain. You also get the faster rate of fire and kill, the occasional fast reload, and the ammo regen, which is really nice for running this. My secondary weapon, I just chose to go with the mechanical animal because it's quite nice. I very rarely use this, to be fair. Pestilence does all the hard work for me, but it's just nice to give myself a couple of extra skill tier to improve my healing or decoy. Really not needed though, you can run whatever you want here. And of course the 3-piece Providence is good because now you can reliably land headshots with this weapon. It's been buffed in TU10 to 15%. I run the Contractor's Gloves because obviously we're running an LMG and the damage to armor is a nice little bonus. So the 3-piece Providence with the Contractors gives me a lot of damage there. Along with the Sawyers, you can either choose to run a Gruppo or a Seska depending on how your stats are looking. With the Gruppo, my critical hit chance was already at 57%, and then my damage is now at 131 with that headshot damage being 100%. And as you can see, my armor damage is 14%, which is really nice. So that's the conjunction of Pestilence and Contractors. So I'm really happy with this build. I think it plays really well, and I'm just going to demonstrate now why you really do need to consider running Braced with the Pestilence. In fact, let's run this as the Invader version because we get the dogs then. I'm not going to go through the whole mission, I'm just going to demonstrate the first few rooms.
Transcripts and notes from months of prisoner interrogations. The information stored on a military-grade laptop, kept in the main holding area downstairs.
So look how like stable it is. It's so easy to just run those consistent headshots now. Look at that, it's beautiful. If I do need to reload, it is rapid. That huge weapon damage I'm getting from Sawyers as well is just phenomenal, and Composure being procced, and obviously the super speedy reload. Again, I know I'm probably going to get some dislikes this video because people are thinking, well, why are you running Braced? Why not just control your aim better and use a damage talent? And do you know what? That makes a lot of sense, and I tried it with that, and yes, it does work. But reload speed is indirectly buffing weapon damage anyway, or should I say DPS, because the less time you spend reloading, the more time you fire in your gun. The more reliably I land my headshots, the more damage I'm doing. So, Braced is indirectly a weapon damage talent. It is. I don't care what anyone says. Yeah, it doesn't translate to raw damage. It's a hidden stat because it's DPS, which factors in your accuracy and reload time. But it's buffing all of those, and it's buffing them so considerably that it turns Pestilence from a bit of a, like I say, an unwieldy beast to an absolute laser that just melts the face off of anything, and then spreads that damage around the room completely free of charge. So try it. I mean, if you're lucky enough to have a chess piece like I have, a Providence, for example, that already has critical hit damage and chance rolled on it, and you can re-roll the talent, just do it, man. Just roll it onto Braced and see what you think. I'll always say don't knock it until you've tried it. And that's so true for this. So yeah, I wouldn't say I've had a lot of hate about it, but I've discussed Brace before on sort of forums and in my clan and so on, and the general feeling around it is a bit sort of meh. People aren't interested in it, but I'm just hoping that this will showcase why it is actually worth running. And you know, again, it all comes back to the same thing. I do class myself as a relatively average gamer with not the best aim, so if anything that can buff the reliability of a weapon is sometimes better than just going for raw DPS talents, because I'll be doing more damage anyway from that increased reliability. I mean, look at it, man. Look at that spread. It's better than it's like an AR. I like that I don't have to just focus on one enemy anymore. I can. Let's flip this turret. So now I can keep the stacks topped off, because that's a mechanical item. Beforehand, if it spreads to a turret or a dog, you couldn't top off the stack. So if it ran out, and there's nothing you can do about it. Now you can. So, you know, this is why I'm saying Pestilence is awesome. It's so good for solo play. And all this time you sat in cover reloading, it's still doing that damage in the background. The fact that I'm landing consistent headshots on that sniper all the way over there with my terrible aim says it all. Let's get this out. Reload off. Super speedy reload. Oh, and also when you hit firing as well, it's really accurate. I forgot to mention that because that's also impacted by accuracy. Wow, these guys really want to burn me alive, huh? I'm just sitting there taking all this fire. It's probably not a smart idea, but... That's the good thing there as well. If your accuracy is as bad as mine, you've still got that tick damage working in the background, and because it does stack with your Sawyers, you know, you're technically, there isn't a higher way to apply that because this is all based on weapon damage. So this is the highest way to do it. I mean, obviously if you put like perfect glass cannon and perfect vigilance on, it would be higher, but the fact that this is kind of filling in that a little bit and I'm still getting the weapon damage from composure, this build's fantastic. And you know, we're also potentially neglecting the fact that I've got 1 armor in here. I'm immune to explosions, and not the damage of them, but I can't be staggered out of cover. And you know, the extra armor on my build is nice. The explosive resistance and the health doesn't really mean too much to me, but I suppose it's that good that it's there. So it's even giving me a little bit of survivability by adding in the 1 blue, whilst giving me technically the equivalent of 2 reds worth of damage just for being in cover. So much synergy with this build. I really hope you try it out. Please let me know in the comments what you think, and if you do have any sort of dislike of these talents, that's absolutely fine as long as you've used them. If you haven't used them, try it first and then feel free to come back to me and let me know your genuine opinion. You know, if you tried it first and you're like, you know what, what's it, Fox, this isn't for me, I'd rather just control the kick or use a different weapon and run glass cannon, fair play to you. I can't blame you at all for that. They're still really strong. I do again want to thank you all for the continued support of my channel. I'm now over 100 subscribers, which I've hit in just over a month, so that's fantastic. Thank you very much for that, and any sort of continued likes and subscribes if you do like the content. I release videos nearly daily at the moment, usually a combination of PvP and PvE build videos. I've also got my named items series just to go through the perfect versions of these talents and just sort of, you know, let people know why they're underrated and why you should be using them more. You can let me know your suggestions for stuff that you want to see on the channel as well. Well, thanks again for sticking through to the end, and I will see you in the next video. Peace.